So I had a good meeting.
Okay, folks. I have 8:30, so welcome. Thank you for coming. Our third iteration, Capital. This is projects. A lot of people get interested in this. This might be a little bit long, so buckle in. We'll take breaks as needed. If you guys, council folks especially, need to, long-winded and you need a break, just yell in and we'll try and do that at there's one good spot here coming up that we'll have one. So, again, thank you. And Ms. Merritt?
All right, so just a few housekeeping items before we get going here. So I circulated communication yesterday that you can anticipate follow-ups to operating budget questions. We'll get a packet to you. I am anticipating by end of day on Tuesday. Some of the questions required a little bit more research, and that's moving along. I just wanted to make it clear in that packet as well, if you asked a question and we answered it on the floor, then it's not included in there. The only questions that we have in that packet are the ones that we either said we would check into or needed some additional research. If for some reason you received that and you believe that you asked a question that's not fully answered or is just not even in the packet, please reach out to me. We did our best to capture those, but could have missed something. Next, we have updated, you have a small packet behind the presentation of just a couple different materials. The one that looks like this, so we did make one change this week to the operating budget. Previously, the council receives about, I think it's exactly $5,000 per year in discretionary funds, each member. This has typically been used to fund different agencies. Groups can fill out applications and request funding from you. That has historically lived within the capital budget, and you probably noticed that it was not in there. We had been reviewing that program and kind of going back and forth on where it best lived. And we determined that after a review of what the expenditures are, that it probably lives best in the operating budget rather than capital, since it's becoming more contributions. So that will now live in a non-departmental department. That's just kind of where everything that doesn't attach to a specific department lives. So you have all of the updated sheets there, and then the operating budget went up by $55,000 to accommodate that. So that's the one small change there, but I would say it really didn't impact the percentages that you had seen before. Lastly, the Civil Rights Department did ask for me to share their full budget request with you. So you have that packet. It looks like this. This was the business case that was submitted. And I do just want to make it clear that their request was for more than one position. There were a number of positions that were requested. And they had just asked that we forward you the full request. And then I would draw you back to, we have included one new position in the budget, which is the attorney position. So that's there for you for information.
I have two questions real quick.
Yep.
One, on the 5,000 for each council person, if it's not used, is that carried over?
It does. You bring up a good question that we are talking about right now. So historically, these funds have started at a fiscal year, but that leaves kind of an interesting situation for those who are incoming, which would mean that you likely don't have any funds starting until July. So that's something that we have on the calendar to talk about this week. And if there's a better way to do that, that's how it's historically been done, but I would say isn't how it has to be done.
But, I mean, if it, does it carry over? So, for example, if the person that previously sat in my seat had
Yes,
funds.
but it's unlikely that that ever happens, is kind of what I'm getting at. Typically, before someone exits, they allocate their funding.
Okay. And then my second question, as to the proposal from Civil Rights, is that something that will be discussed on the 20th?
I don't have any discussion planned for that. We had reviewed all of that and based on the financial condition determined kind of based on that criteria from last week that we could support one new position. But if there is an interest from the council to ask questions or have them present on that or consider more, then I would say that that's at the discretion of the council.
I guess I had a few questions that I had asked, not during the meeting, regarding kind of like a better explanation of that, those line items in the budget. And I thought we would touch base on it on Tuesday.
Those will be.
Those, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you let us know how many additional departments asked for additional people?
Yes.
By department would be nice.
Like, yeah.
Okay. And then, lastly, on the 20th, we also will have Chief Ladle, give a presentation on, GBI, and what that program is and what the statistics are. All right. So with that, we can get going here. So today, we will work through our capital budget, again, continuing to move along through our process. The changes that were made this week did not disrupt any of the budget highlights, so those remain the same and are unchanged. All right. So the capital program, by definition, a capital project typically costs more than $5,000. In a city of our size, we really face that to be kind of around $50,000. We also, when we're looking at a capital item, it typically has a projected useful life of at least 5 years. So if it's something that's only going to last 2 to 3 years, we would typically consider that to be more of an operating item. There are a number of funding sources that work together to fund our entire capital program. The primary funding sources are listed there for you. Obviously, your debt service levy through general obligation bonds, which is property taxes, local option sales tax, road use tax, your different enterprise funds. And I would draw you back to our prior conversation about that. So whenever you see in your funding,
Are they not in order? Or
They were a separate packet.
they should
That's
be
page 7.
slide 7.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
beginning was just unchanged, so.
Thank you.
Okay. So enterprise funds, when you're looking at your funding summary for the CIP, whenever you see that term bonds abated by the solid waste fund or bonds abated by the sewer fund, it just means that the enterprise fund cash is what pays the debt service on that. And then most recently, they're not included here because I would not call them primary funding sources. But more recently, we are utilizing some unspent general fund money, and then special public safety fund money to fund kind of those capital projects where we can. An example, on special public safety would be PD-related technology, and then general fund would be more utilized as seed funding for larger capital projects. An example of that, again, we discussed last week, was the fire station. So we'll start with an overview of the debt service fund. The levy amount is $205, and that's for every $1,000 of taxable value, produces about 11.2 million. Mr. Burmeister joined us earlier this week, and all of the modeling related to that is done in partnership with him. He has several pages of modeling that we work through whenever we're going through the bond issuance process. Funds that come in through this levy, they are restricted for the purpose of funding debt service. And so we consider that to be the principal and the interest that's associated with that debt. Our bond rating is a really critical piece of this. So every spring, we visit with both S&P and Moody's. We go over our full financial condition, and then they issue a rating to the city for that particular issuance series. And so you can think of that like the city's credit score or credit rating, and it ties right into what interest rate we receive when we take our bonds to the market. So it's really important that we have strong ratings, because when we have strong ratings, we benefit from better interest rates. And the better the interest rates that we have, the more cash available to do more projects. By code, in Iowa, you're limited to debt that's 5% of our gross valuation. So I would draw your attention to the bottom there. Our current margin is 48.04%, which means that we have about 196 million in capacity. I would never recommend that we go anywhere close to that. Those ratings on the right would be, I would say, severely impacted from that decision. But our current debt is about 52%. And then just kind of as a side note here, we will be visiting with the rating agencies in March this year. That will kick off this process for us. So fund capacity, this has been, I would say, continuously improving over the years. The cash at the end of '23 was over 26 million. As we look to '24, which is our current fiscal year, based on some updated financials, we're anticipating that the cash would be about 22.9. And that also includes that large payoff of the fire station. So that's why you see that going down. And then I would just say lastly, and I think we've discussed this quite a bit, that we're continuing to look kind of at the rating agency's direction for more innovative ways to fund our projects rather than just continuing to say that our entire CIP is funded by GO bonds. And I think that's why you see this variety of funding sources that continues to grow. So fund performance, this is something that we share with our rating agencies just to continue to demonstrate that we believe that we are moving in the right direction and doing what they have asked of us. Primarily, the chart on the right, so that represents our debt load compared to our limit. And you can see that it continues to go down pretty significantly. And then the blue bar there is just anticipated for '24, so that's not an actual. The yellows are actual, and then blue is just anticipated. Yes, sir.
How have we been able to successfully lower our debt load?
So I would say it's a couple of things. Back about, I would say 6 to 7 years ago, the administration between finance, the council, and administration worked together to what we call right-size our capital program, and to model things with PFM really closely where, so I'll go back just a little bit. The debt that you issue today, you're paying for 10 years. So if we issue 20 million in debt, that's not just a today problem. We have to make that payment for however long that we've committed. So it compounds. And that's why we need really sophisticated modeling through PFM to tell us based on interest rates. Every series has a different interest rate. We need them to model each series and tell us based on that interest rate, here's what your liability is. So it's right-sizing the program, and then it's using these innovative and creative funding strategies that's not solely reliant on issuing debt.
So you see us being able to continue to do this then in the future?
I do. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think another big piece of that's the health of the enterprise funds, Alderman Reinhardt. When previously you're relying on all debt to fund your sewer improvements or your water pollution control plant improvements, you would be looking at $10 to $15 million in debt. As the health of those funds continues, we can start to look towards those funds to pay for those in cash rather than these huge debt issuances. So it's all of that together. There's not one single thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good to have access.
All right, so the debt service fund, the yellow dotted line there is what I would say represents a very healthy cash balance within a fund of this size and for a city our size, so about 15 million. The red line represents what our actual cash balance is. You can see again that there is that anticipated decrease in '24 as we make that payoff of the fire station. You'll see that it's still quite a bit above the yellow line though. So I think kind of back, Alderman Kelly, to your point either, I think it was Tuesday, or maybe Saturday, about how much is too much, and, you know, when we take money in, the expectation is that we're then pushing it back out into the community. That will be a discussion for you to have probably this fall when we better understand what facility needs that we have. So when we have a better wraparound of what we're doing with junior theater and animal services and all of these, then I would anticipate you could have a conversation with PFM and with your staff team about how to continue to draw this down in a way that pushes out good things into the community. All right, moving into local sales tax. The referendum for this, again, was in 1988. For the city, this means that 60% of the funds that we receive through this revenue are designated for property tax relief. In your budget, that mostly means that it's transferred out to the debt service fund and to the general fund. 40% of those funds are for pay-as-you-go capital, so cash capital. It's about 1% of the sales tax that's generated comes back to us. They did recently kind of rework the formula. A resident asked a question about that, so I've got the formula here. It's fairly complex, but we will provide it to you. At least we now know what it is. There were a number of years that we did not fully even understand how they were calculating this. So we at least have the information now.
So when we say they, you mean the state?
Yes.
Right.
Yep. So for FY 25, the budgeted revenues are about 18 million. And previously, those had been budgeted at 17 million, but based on the consistency around that revenue source, we felt like we could incrementally grow that by $1 million, and we'll just keep watching it. So the next slide here depicts the revenue history. Your actuals are in red, and then what the budget is in blue. And as we went over, this is a fund where we budget very conservatively just because it can be volatile, which you see in some of those earlier years. But I think the trend has held for, I would say, at least 5 years in this case, and we felt comfortable adjusting it. For FY 24, I would say the important thing here from slide 16 is the original budget was about 17.3 million, and then the re-estimated based on what we've been receiving is 23 million. So that goes in line with that other slide and why that margin is so significant. And I would say, you know, one of the other kind of benefits to this is historically, if a project is funded by local sales tax and it does not get completed, or if for some reason it doesn't even start in that fiscal year, as we were trying to grow the fund balance in this area, the decision a number of years ago was that those projects would not roll over. So essentially, if a project was funded this way and it didn't start, it was just defunded. Because of the strength of this, we're able to roll the projects forward and continue to fund them. And I think, you know, that's had positive results too. It's allowing us to complete more. So that's another important reason to maintain some degree of margin here. The expenditures within this fund are there for you in this pie chart. You can see that the majority fall within non-departmental expenses, and that's the transfer. So that's your transfer out to debt into the general fund. And then the remaining portion there is just, and to the CIP, sorry about that. And then the salaries and benefits primarily fund some street operations, and then your engineering staff. And then lastly is just a graph of the fund balance showing that it is healthy. All right, and then lastly, our road use tax fund. So this has been around for quite some time, established by the state in 1949. It's distributed back, what's collected is distributed back to the cities on a per capita basis. The revenues are really designated, I think we as staff say, for work that's between the curbs. So maintaining and improving our street network and our system. You may recall that in 2015, the state did approve and change and add a 10-cent per gallon increase. For the city at that time, it produced an additional $1.6 million in an annual investment. The council direction at that time was to directly apply that increased $1.6 million to streets, to actual projects getting done. So in your CIP, you see that in the high volume street repair program. And then this is just a history of your revenues. That peak point there was a little bit of an anomaly tied to COVID. We did receive an additional distribution from the state that was tied to COVID relief. And then the breakdown of your expenditures, over half of this fund is the lighter blue. And that typically is utilized to fund the streets division. So all of the maintenance team that you have. And then again, just a slide showing you that your fund balance in this fund is healthy as well. And that concludes the funds. So before I turn it over to Engineering, Capital, and Public Works to walk through the next portion, any questions related to these operating funds?
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Before jumping straight into the program, I want to talk a little bit about process, just to give an update on how we walk through from a capital perspective. It largely mirrors the operational budget, or as Matthew and Mallory and their team start putting together the operational budget. In September, the capital team, we reach out to all of our department directors and our division managers, and we ask for them to request all of their upcoming projects. So they have about a month to submit those to myself and our team. And we ask them, please give us what you think you need and what you would like. We do not apply fiscal constraint at that time. Once we receive those, sometime between September and October, between October and November, we review those and we refine those. We ask questions. We try to dive further into their request, so that in November, we have what's in your larger budget book, it will refer to as the CIP Technical Committee. That consists of your interim city administrator, members of the finance team, all department directors, and key staff such as the city engineer, or key operational leadership members of the various departments. From that point, finance has provided us the funding targets of all the funding sources that we're going to talk about. For instance, general obligation bonds, something we just spoke about. They would say in 2025, the target is 18 million. Well, in that case, we then go through as a technical committee and we start applying that fiscal constraint to what's been requested by the various departments. So just an example, there could be $28 million worth of requests, but we have $18 million available. So we as a team get together and we work through what those priorities are. And that's how we get to what's in front of you today. So that's generally a month to month and a half long process as we go through. There we go. So what we have in front of you today, the highlights is large scale infrastructure into our street network. So we have over $11 million for street maintenance and grant projects, a little about $2.8 million for bridges, and over $500,000 for traffic engineering. We also continue the modernization of our sewer collection system with over $7 million in sanitary sewers, 1.2, almost 1.3 in stormwater, and 1.2 at our wastewater treatment facility. And then also we continue having large capital investment into public safety. So this is obviously outside of the operating budget, and we're going to go over what specifically these projects are. Next, one of the things I would like to touch on, our CIP is a 6-year plan, and that 6-year plan is revisited every year as part of the annual budget. One of the things that I use them interchangeably, so is in this case, I say year one. Year one is the only year of that 6-year plan that receives funds. Years 2 through 6 is just a planning style document for both the council and the community to kind of see what's going forward. However, one of the benefits of continuing to update this on an annual basis is the council has the flexibility that when things come forward that were not anticipated from 12, 15 plus months ago, you can make those changes as part of that fiscal year budget. So year one is fiscal year 25, and what's before you is a little over $39 million of investment. And then you can see throughout the full 6-year plan, $234 million. And so before diving into the specific individual projects and programs that make up this plan, we're going to kind of look at everything from a high-level position and then get into those projects. We always like to show this slide. It's just a pie chart of the various categories that we've put together. And just to show that your largest category is your streets, your second largest category is your sanitary sewer repair, and you add in those other items like stormwater and water pollution control, you see that the vast majority of your capital budget goes into your general infrastructure upgrades. Next is one of the things we like to look at is those categories. And so in the 20-year 2025 budget, you will see that in bridges, or we just mentioned bridges, but your fleet, this is augmenting what's existing within your operating budget, but it's about $3.2 million of investment. Parks and Recreation, it's about 1.4. Riverfront, which is 1.6, and all that is dealing with the implementation of the flood resiliency plan, or the continuing implementation of that. And then you can see some of the other items we just spoke about. My personal favorite of how to look at all of this is how we fund all of these projects. So it's easy to look at something and say, or conversations I have with residents saying, well, let's not do X project and let's instead do Y. Well, a lot of times we are restricted by the funding of those projects. And so this is why it's my personal favorite to look at it. And in your larger budget packet, there's a report by funding source. So what Mallory was referring to when you see bonds abated by the sewer fund, so you see those are specific sanitary sewer projects. Same with solid waste fund. One of the things that you'll see is federal and state grants. We'll talk about that in just a minute. We are anticipating about $3 million to be put into the 25 budget. General obligation bonds, so it's 18.5 million is what has been allocated as well. And then want to touch on one other more just to reiterate is road use tax. That's that 1.6 million that Mallory just touched on a few moments ago. Next is we like to showcase what the budget looks like from the current year budget to the proposed budget, and you can see how it shifts over time. If you see large shifts in different categories, that is almost primarily due to grants and the timing of those grants, and I will provide 2 examples. I would take a look at fleet. So in the current fiscal year budget, we had $7.5 million. In the upcoming budget, 3.1. So we were very fortunate this fiscal year to receive about a $4.8 million grant for transit, and that was for the purchase and implementation of electric buses. So that's a one-time project. A grant of that size in our fleet system is rather abnormal, and so that's where you see what that fluctuation is. Two more examples. Water pollution control plant, you see 0. That's kind of an anomaly as well. So our water pollution control plant and our compost facility are funded with the water pollution control plant fund. The current fiscal year, the capital funding for that went to upgrades at our compost facility. And that was put into the facility maintenance category. So a little bit of anomaly there. And then lastly, streets. You will see in the current budget, it's 19.3 million, whereas in the proposed budget, we're at 11.25. I will show you on the next slide, that is entirely due to the timing of grants.
I have a quick question. The Parks and Recreation, That one jumped. Did you say that, anything about that? I'm sorry.
No, I'm happy to do so. And if there's any questions, please stop me as we go along. So, in the current budget, so in 2024, 650,000, that was due to a significant investment was made into the park system with ARPA funding. And so we wanted to make sure that we did, that our Parks and Rec team had the time and effort to then implement those projects. And so in the current budget, there was less capital. Right now, I would say we're kind of more back to normal as we start funding them at kind of the normal levels. We always love to show this particular side when it comes to streets because it will show you the ebb and flow of grants over time. So we always like to say streets are two different types of categories. First is grants and then special projects, and then you can kind of see the maintenance programs. The maintenance programs are fully funded with city funds, and so you can see over time that, let's go back to fiscal year '23, you were at 9.4 million, and then you get to the current year at 9.8. And then you can see in this upcoming year, it's at 9.8. So we continue to fund street maintenance at a very high level using city resources, whereas grants are just due to timing. So in the previous fiscal budget, you can see that's entirely because of 3rd and 4th Street coming online at $9.3 billion. But you'll see if you look in in one of your reports in your budget book is the programs by category, you will see generally almost every other year, it just goes up and down over time. Does anyone have any questions? So I don't know if we wanted,
We're gonna take a short 5-minute break, get
Okay, we'll continue on with individual areas, projects.
Sure. So before jumping straight in, I want to talk a little bit about what's on the screen and what's on your page. It's a little bit different than a PowerPoint. On your left-hand side, it's going to describe the project or program. It's going to provide a description. It's the funding that's within the proposed plan, whether it's in year one, so fiscal year 2025, and then if it's over multiple years, what the total value of the project or program is. And then beneath that, it will show kind of a legend of what you're going to show on the map. On the right-hand side of the screen, like to use this piece of software because for two purposes. First and foremost, it allows you to visualize your assets, and where they're located, and then also it provides context of progress over time. One of the questions we often get is, you're only doing so much, 1 or 2 bridges in a year. Like, well, that might represent millions of dollars, but over a 3, 4, 5, 6 year span, you can see the progress being made in terms of that particular thing. So just like to show that as we go through. So our first one that we're going to look through is bridge maintenance program. So by state code, every 24 months, we hire out a third-party engineering firm to do an inspection report on all of our vehicular bridges. And so in fiscal year '25, we have allocated $260,000 over the full 6 years, $1.2 million for simply bridge maintenance. The map on to your right, actually every dot represents the vehicular bridges throughout the city of Davenport. Everything that's in green is actually the bridges that are encompassed in your 6-year plan that is not maintenance. And we'll go over some of those momentarily. What's in orange actually showcases what's been done since 2019. And then what's in yellow is what we're actually looking to perform this current construction or calendar year. For instance, there's 4 of them, and I'll just kind of scroll a little bit. Off on the west side of the city, 46th Street Bridge over Cardinal Creek is underway now. And then just south of that, once it's completed, Utah over Duck Creek will be reconstructed as well. And then from a bridge maintenance perspective, there are 2 bridges on East Locust Street, one over Canadian Pacific and Kansas City rail line that's going to get maintenance work, and then one bridge over Jersey Ridge as well. So that is scheduled to get work this calendar year. Next are the individual bridges within the bridge program. East 13th Street, so a number of years ago, well, actually, I'll circle back to the bridge inspection that we do. We actually do inspect private bridges as well, especially if they hold vehicular traffic. So there were two bridges that were owned by Canadian Pacific at the time, Elm Street and East 13th Street. We continuously looked at those and inspected those. It got to a point where we felt like they were no longer safe. And so we removed access to those bridges and then had a negotiation with CP to take ownership of those back. And then subsequently, we were going to replace those. Elm Street has been completed, and so it is up and it's operational. East 13th was the second of those bridges. So recently, we were able to get a $1.5 million grant from the state of Iowa for the replacement of this bridge. And so we've also programmed $700,000 of city resources for a total of $2.2 million to get this one done. And like I said, if you have any questions on these specific ones, please stop me. Next is Eastern Avenue Bridge over Duck Creek. In 2025, we have set aside some design funding, so $50,000 of city funds to match $160,000 of a federal grant. Overall, a $2.6 million project in the next two upcoming fiscal years, and this is for a full-scale bridge replacement. I know I get a question on this a lot. This bridge will actually be raised slightly so that we can safely get the Duck Creek Trail system to go underneath the bridge as well, so that there no longer has to be an at-grade crossing there. So there is a good multimodal safety component there as well built into the project. Next, we're going to head just a little bit north on Eastern Avenue. So we have two bridges. The official engineering term is actually referred to as sister bridges. So they're the Eastern Avenue bridges over Goose Creek. Bridge number A is the north structure, and in the out years, we have about $440,000 for deck replacement for that particular bridge. But in 2025, we have $180,000 for design work for the full reconstruction of Bridge B, which is the southern structure. So this last, I would probably say 2 months, we've actually were awarded a $1.5 million state grant for that reconstruction effort. So that particular bridge is, once these funds become available, we'll initiate that design work in this coming up summer. Next, in fiscal year 26, design funding for the replacement of South Clark Street Bridge in 2 fiscal years, about $770,000. Yes.
Hey, just one question on the Eastern Avenue bridges. I'm assuming that those would be done in a similar way to what the state did on Brady Street and maybe keep Eastern Avenue open during that?
That is correct. Yep. So I would say the last few bridge replacements we've done, I'll go back to Division Street Bridge over Duck Creek because it was right next to several schools. We were able to complete that project and keep traffic. So essentially, half the traffic on one side, and then we'd flip and do the next half. Next is we're going to go into a number of facilities. So Modern Women Park facility. So by contract, we have a dollar value that's put into every fiscal year. So in 2025, it's a total of $636,000. Across the full 6 years, it's about $3.8 million. I do know we have an upcoming work session scheduled for sometime in March to discuss this moving forward.
I have a question. The money that we see, like, for example, for fiscal year 2025, is that already spent?
Yes,
And what about for 2026?
Yes.
that is correct.
Okay, well, 27?
Yes.
So the contract is split splits this money into 2 different buckets. I guess maybe is the best term to use it. It's called the CIF and the SIF. And so there is funding, I believe. I'm more than happy to follow up as part of our follow-up to this and provide you the full overview of where everything lands. I believe the SIF has funding available in either 26 or 27. The SIF, it's much further out. And once again, I'll get you those specifics as a follow-up.
Thank you.
Is there any other facility we put this kind of investment into?
over time, from a facility standpoint, outside the construction of a fire station, I can't recall off the top of my head.
I know we're having a meeting with Mr. Heller Monday, and there's a lot of concerns, but, you know, we just keep pumping a lot of money into this, and we got a lot more contractually that we have to do, and, you know, at some point, some of this kind of, in my mind, is out of control. But we'll have that discussion in a work session, so. And I thank you for all the information that we received. I think some of my council members received it as well. Quite interesting that there hasn't been any rent paid for 5 years, so. But we'll have that discussion at a later time, so thanks for all that information.
I'm sorry.
Just looking at our investment in the Modern Woodman Park, what type of revenue generation do we get out of it?
From a direct rent standpoint, the last number of years, or I'll go back, when we revised the lease agreement, one of the attachments to the lease agreement says that they perform the day-to-day maintenance of the facility. And then when they perform that, then we will review it. And then we will, if it is in line with the contract, we will deduct it from their rent. So that is the reason why, over a number of years, they have not paid any rent, because their deductions have exceeded their rent. So from a pure revenue standpoint, from getting a rent payment, we have not received anything.
Do we check when they do their maintenance, that they're doing their maintenance correctly to code?
Yes, so we do spot check their maintenance throughout, and we also verify all of their invoicing and their payments. And we also ensure that they follow the city purchasing policy. So if something is, for instance, $5,000 or $6,000, that they have to get the 3 quotes and everything like that. Yes.
Okay.
What's the date? I know we talked about there's going to be a full workshop on this, correct, in March? Do you have the date, just so that for people here that like to have that date?
March 23rd.
23rd, thank you.
Okay. So next facility is Rivers Edge. So in the next upcoming fiscal year, so $250,000 for the purchase of a new ice resurfacer. In fiscal year 27, roof replacement at $500,000, and the installation of some skate-safe flooring in fiscal year 29 at $250,000. Our next facility to the east is the Freight House. So we have a number of improvements slated for this upcoming fiscal year, whether it's lintels and seals replacement, window replacement, fire alarm replacement throughout. So you can see those on the left-hand side of the screen. And then throughout the 6 years, we have a number of improvements also scheduled. This is sometimes when you get into projects, it's one of those things is you do one project and it's kind of peeling the onion back kind of thing. So within the current fiscal budget, we have funding to do the roof replacement. And then so you start looking at that and you start looking at the lintels and seals. You should do that right afterwards. Well, if you're going to do that one, there's some masonry repairs, and you should do the masonry repairs before you start doing those. So there's an economy of scale. So we can all do that in one. So a pretty significant investment at the Freight House, but much needed. Next is the replacement of 2 salt storage buildings at 2 public works facilities. So in fiscal year 26, $500,000 for the facility located at Public Works. And then in fiscal year 2028, another $500,000 for the one at the Marquette facility. And your map actually showcases the location of those. So, and if you have questions, Nicole can jump in with more specifics, but we like to ensure that we have those 2 locations in, those 2 locations of the city, so we can continue to provide salt for our plows as we go forward. We don't like to keep them centrally located. Next, similar to Freight House, we'll have a number of improvements to our libraries. So we own and maintain 3 libraries: Maine, Fairmount, and Eastern. Upcoming is Eastern has geothermal system repairs needed, so about $130,000 in fiscal year 25. Just Fairmount has a roof replacement, so we have funding set aside for, in the next fiscal year for design, for construction to follow in fiscal year '26. And then there's some other smaller base projects there throughout. I would also say probably the one other one is carpet replacement in 2026 and 2027, and that's both for Fairmount and Eastern Avenue Library. Similar to the libraries is our fire stations. In fiscal year 2025, a roof replacement at Station 4, some concrete replacement at 4, 5, and 7, door replacements at 5 and 8 in 2026. Our fire boathouse protection, $170,000. It's located in Centennial Park, and then a roof replacement on Station 6 in fiscal year 2027.
Now that our new Fire Station 3 is opening, what is our plan for the old station?
So we have not, I would say, fully started that conversation. There are a number of items that weigh into that. I think we can have that discussion at the staff level and then maybe circle back on that. I would say we don't have a solid plan in place for that right now.
In a weirdly personal, I thought it was exciting that I got to move the icon from the old station to the new one. So it's the little things that you get enjoyment out of. Next is our fleet equipment purchases. So kind of what we previously talked about. A lot of our operational, but most of it is housed within our operational budget. But because of the size and scope of the services we provide and the increases in what these costs are, we augment what's in the operating budget with capital funding. And that's to ensure that we continue to provide the services that we look to provide. So basically, you just have a Excel sheet here showcasing where all these programs and projects come out of. I will highlight just a couple. So solid waste program, so $920,000. That's for both our garbage and recycling, just to ensure that we're on a scheduled replacement. Public safety vehicles, $400,000. Construction equipment, this is for our street maintenance division. So they get $450,000. Let's see, fire apparatus. So this is an interesting one as well. So $950,000 in fiscal year '25. This is to replace one engine. Chief will probably nod his head very quickly at this, but a couple of years ago, I remember this was $550,000 for an engine replacement, and then I think the council's last one you approved, or the last one the previous council approved, was around $750,000. It's now grown to $950,000. And it's, once you order it, it's a 2.5 to 3 year wait before you receive it. So we want to ensure that we're constantly keeping our engines and our ladder trucks regularly replaced. And with such a long lead time, we want to make sure we get our order in on time. So as you can see, about $20 million worth of investment across 6 years.
Yeah, just one question that someone asked, and I'll ask out loud. So when we negotiate the price, it's the price or they're built in, since it takes 2.5 years, do they build in inflation factors? So if we have a bid for $750,000, is it $750,000 2.5 years later?
I'm going to say that my understanding is,
Does not increase, right?
so once you all approve the purchase, that
Right.
is the price.
Got it, thank you.
Next, as we get into our general government category, one of the things we'll look at is our urban revitalization program. And specifically, that is how we fund our DREAM program. What's here is in fiscal year '25, we got a little over $1 million. Across the 6 years, it's a little over $7 million. This is one of the fun things about having an interactive map. Sometimes it looks like it doesn't want to showcase, but nevertheless, what you see on the right side is kind of the various iterations we have. We've gone through 4 rounds of DREAM, which is what's blue, the last round of DREAM, and last calendar year is in orange. What is in green is the project selected through DREAM Plus. And then we've had 2 projects as part of Extreme DREAM. So a very new program, but from what you can kind of see, it's a very successful program as we kind of look to revitalize our areas.
And just one item related to this, Director Berger and I spoke earlier this week. We're going to be scheduling a time for him to come to a Tuesday and present all of these different programs and how they work together, because each of them are a little bit nuanced, but the overall strategy ties in. So that will be upcoming as we go into the next quarter.
So our next program is demolition. And so $200,000 in 2025, $1.1 million across the 6-year plan. What's on your map, or what's on your printout, rather?
We don't have that one. Look at this one.
Oh, well. and that-
Nobody has it, so just show it here.
Okay, well, is
Probably turn
the,
up. Well, there it is.
do we have the?
Just carry on.
It's
Okay.
okay.
Just carry on.
Okay, so what you'll have there is, in blue is what we've done since fiscal year 2016, and what's in orange is what we have, projects completed in the last calendar year.
Question?
Yes.
Oh, okay. How do we determine that a structure needs to be demolished as opposed to rehab?
So I'll take a stab at this, and if I say anything wrong, Rich will come correct me. So generally, we keep a list of vacant properties, and as we go through those vacant properties, we have a matrix for scoring their condition. So if the condition is that the structure is deemed unsafe, those would go to the top of the list. Additionally, if a property catches fire, during a fiscal year, we reserve some funds for those that don't have insurance, and the city has to step in and do that demolition. So I would say at any given time, we have between 20 and 30 properties on that demolition list that Rich's team is recategorizing every year. And then we're based on the funding we get, we make sure we demolition the most critical ones and try to keep those that we feel could be rehabilitated at the bottom, but still keeping our eye on them, making sure our staff is aware if they need to be boarded up or things like that.
Who evaluates though whether they can be rehabbed or not?
We're just
That's
really.
more of the question I'm looking
Right.
for an answer for.
So we're evaluating the exterior of the structure more than anything. We sometimes get inquiries on these vacant properties, or people inquire on the vacant property list. If we're able to connect interested parties to the homeowners, then they would, I guess, go in and make that ultimate evaluation. So really, we don't know necessarily the inside without that happening, and oftentimes it's hard to find the owner, or the owner has been deceased and the children own it and are out of town. So we do the best we can to try to make those connections when we get inquiries, but really our evaluation is purely on the exterior. Oh, go ahead.
I do believe though you can, if there's a structural, visual, you can get a court order to go in.
Yes, a
If
warrant.
if the
Yep.
owner's not compliant, so if you see something
That's
that's
alarming.
cracked, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, looking for.
I
an
just
owner.
want to make sure that we're not tearing things down that could be rehabbed for future use. Get back on the tax list and we can actually provide some housing for people that need it.
Absolutely, and that's our goal, and that's kind of why we reprioritize usually every year in the spring, to make sure that we're not tearing down anything that we feel could potentially be rehabbed.
Okay, thank you.
So I kind of want to draw a comparison between the two slides. So we've got all of the projects that we've done for Dream, and then we've got all of the demolition projects. Typically, you could overlay the neighborhoods and see that, right, these are the same neighborhoods. Been a big proponent of Dream. It's been successful in a number of ways. The one thing it has not been effective at is taking vacant properties and building new homes on those properties, right? And so the issue with demolition is, as you demolish houses, you create gaps in the block. And once you get enough gaps in a block, I mean, there's studies, that block is never coming back. It's never coming back, right? And so we have to figure out how we can entice people and maybe even the city, like, we need to be very creative in how we look at it. How do we use DREAM dollars to get new houses built on vacant lots? It's the missing piece of what we've done with DREAM. And if we really want to keep our historic neighborhoods and our heritage neighborhoods sustainable for a long time, we got to figure out that piece and reduce the number that we're demolishing and get developers to a place that they're going to fill in vacant lots.
Those vacant lots are all over the city. I mean, so just the dream and the demolition too don't tell the whole story. So it's all over.
And yeah, I think you're right. I think it, well, if you look at the map, most are there, but it's continuing to spread. What was the traditional area where the vacant or the empty lots where things have been torn down has started to spread to the west, for instance, I think, toward First Ward. And it wasn't like that at one time, so.
Well, I mean, if you think about ring development theory also, where we started with DREAM, ideally, you go to the next ring of development, like you take this area and you go north probably from Locust to Central Park, and you start trying to save the neighborhoods that haven't got to the point that the neighborhoods we're currently working on already are, right? And so you're proving out a process, you see that it's successful, and then you move it to the next ring, because that's how cities developed in the last 100 years. And then you try to get there sooner than you did in the initial neighborhood. So I'm not knocking DREAM, we've done a lot of good things. I'm saying we need to figure out the vacant parcel problem, and then we need to figure out how to take it to the next ring so we can get there sooner. And the sooner you get there, the more effective you're gonna be in saving the neighborhoods.
I'm assuming that'll be a good conversation when we finally pay off the new program or now program that we funded, previous councils funded years ago. We're still paying for it, probably about $1 million a year.
Okay, one more and then we're gonna go
Okay,
on.
just as, when Mr. Berger comes to do Dream, maybe he could, for, again, people who have not been around the table, could quickly go through some of our housing things as well as Dream. So what's been done in the past, a little history, because we can't assume that everybody has been part of that, and it might be helpful and perspective, for sure.
So our next project is a growth plan it's a land use sub-area of the growth plan. Well, before chatting about that, I want to bring the reason why. So as you can see, it's on the map, the line that's highlighted in blue, that is the Duck Creek Interceptor Sewer Project. It is actually now underway as we move forward. That's one of our larger projects of the last few years. That project is primarily focused on the removal of a lagoon structure down west of 280. However, there is a secondary benefit of that project in that it actually brings sewer to the area that you can see highlighted specifically, I don't use my mouse, like in this particular area. And as we know, development typically follows infrastructure. And so once you have infrastructure out there, there is the possibility that development will follow. And so to ensure that we have orderly development within, the city's, land use plan and our service boundary areas, we want to ensure that we have that plan in place before the sewer project is completed. And so this proposal puts $80,000 in the upcoming fiscal year to then look specifically at this area.
So this is a great project. So not only does this benefit the city tax base, it also benefits the school tax base.
Yep.
Like the last development that we did. The city got plenty of tax base off that, but the school district suffered because that's different.
Yep.
So this is going to be a great project at some point if it's going. So thank you.
The next project is an overarching comprehensive plan update. So this is in an outer year, so fiscal year 2029, so $250,000 to just continue to look at our various zoning areas throughout the entirety of the city. The last time that this was performed, there was a partial update, and it was in 2016. So once again, this is a good example of using the 6-year plan as just putting something out there to show that in future years it's something that we're looking to do. Next is our library services, so material program. This is a popular one for us. So in 2025, $465,000. This goes to the purchases of books, magazines, CDs, online subscriptions. So anyone that takes part in our library services can get updated materials. So across the 6 years, it's $2.5 million. Next is we're going to get into our multimodal category, the first of which is creating connections. So this is so it's $600,000 in the upcoming fiscal year, $3.2 million across the 6-year program. So this encapsulates two things. First, we have a very successful cost share program for sidewalk repair. So in essence, if you're a residential property, you can call up to engineering and public works, and you can request to get half of your sidewalk paid for, and the city will pay for half of it, and we will use our contractor to do so. I would say it's so popular that we typically have a 1 or 2 year wait list to even get on it, and that's at funding something at this level. In addition to that, we also try to strategically look at areas that have missing links throughout the sidewalk system, where in particular in neighborhoods where you will have 5 homes where there's sidewalks, and then you have 1 or 2 parcels, no sidewalk, and then 3 homes on the other side where there is sidewalk. Those are areas in which the council, and we would bring that before you for your decision, where we can order in sidewalk, and that's the property owner's responsibility, and they can either perform the work themselves, or we can do that for them, and then we can assess them over time. So there's ways to do that, and this is what we primarily use this program for. As you can see, since fiscal year 2016, what's in blue is what we've completed, and then what's in orange is what we completed last year. So it's spread pretty evenly throughout the entirety of the city. The next program we have is Civic Access. So this is the repair and reconstruction of ADA ramps throughout the city. So it's $250,000 in fiscal year 25, $1.4 million across the 6-year plan. And once again, you can kind of see where we've been going for in the last probably, I'd say, 6 to 7 years. Next, we're going to get into specific projects as it relates to multimodal. In fiscal year 25, we have $30,000 set aside for design of the West Loop Phase 2. And then across both 25 and 26, about $720,000. 550 of it is federal grant. Before, I kind of want to give you a little context for what this is. So what you see on the screen, what is green is the current trail system. And what is blue is West Loop Phase 1. That is an already funded project that is 80% of it being paid for with federal grants. Hoping to have that under construction this year, and that actually takes where the Duck Creek Trail terminates right at Emice, brings it down to Locust on the north side, all the way over to Wisconsin, and then crosses Wisconsin, and that's where Phase 2 will pick it up and go all the way down to 11th, which is the last subdivision that's in that area. And so the idea is that at that point, those subdivisions south of Locust can then access the Duck Creek Trail. Now, long term is we would actually, in future phases, like to then connect to Sunderbrook, and then Sunderbrook down to the Riverfront Trail. Yes, sir.
So on a lot of the multimodal, you had federal grant money designated in out years. So we have already received that, like those are approved grants?
So this one has been approved. The next one, we'll find out in the next 2 weeks or so. I have good confidence that we will receive that as well.
So would we be calling 11th Street to telegraph phase 3?
Phase 3.
Okay.
The next one, Goose Creek Trail Phase 4. So this is one we have not received the federal grant for, but we feel strongly that we will be able to get it. But design money in fiscal year 26, $150,000. We've applied for about a $1.6 million federal grant for a $2.1 million project. So for context purposes, once again, what's in green is the existing trail system. What is in blue is Goose Creek Trail Phase 3. That is the ARPA-funded project that is scheduled to begin construction later in the fall. And that essentially takes you from the Duck Creek Trail, gets you all the way to Kimberly. You will go underneath Kimberly, the bridge at Kimberly and Eastern, and then you will go to the, that will pop you out on the north side. You will then go to Mississippi Avenue, which for temporary purposes is on-street, an on-street signage until you get up to 39th, and then from there, it will go off-street again until you hit 46th Street, where you connect to the existing trail. And if my map worked, I would then back out and show you kind of to the very north here, north of 53rd, we actually completed last year. That was Goose Creek Trail Phase 2, and that got you underneath 53rd, all the way up to 59th, and then from 59th all the way to the Veterans Memorial Trail is another construction project that we're looking to do this year. And I would say to Alderman Grip's point, all of this is largely funded through federal grants that we've been able to receive. Sorry, I got so excited talking about the larger project. Phase 4 actually will pick it up here on Eastern the Trail. It will go underneath that south bridge structure, take you to the east, go north, and then take you underneath that north structure. So once again, the goal is to eliminate at-grade crossings between pedestrians and bicyclists and vehicular traffic. Next is Parks and Recreation. So we have the Park Development Program. So in fiscal year 2025, $350,000 over 6 years, 2.1. This particular program is administered by Chad and his team. So what he does is he proposes a series of projects to the Park Advisory Board. They rank those projects. Chad will then, probably later this month, will then give you those rankings for your thoughts and considerations of how to use that $350,000. You can see over the last, since fiscal year 2015, what is shown is where that has been dispersed throughout the city, and what's in orange is what's within the current fiscal year. Next is improvements to Duck Creek Park. So $400,000 in the next fiscal year, and this is to be balanced with, I believe, $200,000 within the existing fiscal year budget to do some to redo some of these tennis courts, and I believe install some pickleball courts as well in this specific area. Yes.
Right, for Chad. Chad, last year when we had this conversation, I know Alderman Jojen was working through this with the neighbors. It seemed to be a bigger conversation with the dog park included, and I don't see the dog park in here. So, you know, what's changed between last year and this year with this?
Essentially, the dog park wasn't seen as favorable by the neighbors, so we tabled that part.
Next is $100,000 set aside in 2025 for design work, and $1 million set aside in the next fiscal year. So the stone fountain at Vanderveer, we need to do some large-scale renovations or replacement. We've been having issues over the last few years in getting that to function properly, and Chad and his operational team has done everything that they can to try and remedy the situation. So now it's time to bring in some third-party consultants to see if we can figure out how to get that back up and running through some methods.
Yes. So here in a few months, can we expect that the fountain will be on, or is it off until we make an investment?
It'll be operational park capacity as it was last year.
Next is improvements at Credit Island. So in fiscal year '26, $300,000, and then $100,000 in 2029 and 2030. So for a total of an additional $500,000.
So,
On that one, in the past few budgets, we've had money to do a study. And we kept pushing that back this year, where are we at with that?
Is this for the causeway?
Yep.
Okay, so we currently have a grant into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for this. That particular grant would actually pay 100% for that study, along with any design and construction cost as well, the vast majority if we get to that stage. We are in communication with that program manager. Currently, they're waiting on the federal budget to get approved before they start allocating those resources. So it's one where we were hoping that we can get the federal government to help us pay for rather than the city paying primarily the full cost. Not to mention, if it gets funded, they will then almost automatically be interested in design and construction costs, not just the study cost. So
So if we don't get federal funding, we're gonna put it back in the program where we originally had it, or?
correct. I would say that if we're not able to get a grant for that, then we will place it back into the 6-year plan.
Okay, thanks.
Next is improvements at our 3 golf courses. So in 2025, $225,000, and in 2029, an additional $225,000 for a total of $450,000. Next is our playground replacement program. In fiscal year 2026, $170,000, and in fiscal year 2030, an additional $170,000. So this particular program was instituted only a couple of years ago through Chad, and this is for building larger play structures throughout the system. So not just our, I say normal, but our normal $50,000 to $60,000 playground sets. But I would give kudos to Chad and his team. As you can see on the map, actually what is in orange is previously funded playground replacements. So they have been very aggressive in switching those playgrounds out or building new playgrounds. And once again, that was augmented by ARPA funding, and that's the ones in yellow.
Are the new playgrounds, are we trying to go more towards the ADA so all kids can use all of the playground equipment?
All our playgrounds will always be ADA. What we are doing is trying to bring more inclusive play, which is a step up from ADA. The next inclusive play that will be at This program will be that inclusive play on the east side, and that's probably at Dunker.
Next is various equipment purchases for our public safety departments. So body worn cameras. So in fiscal year 2025, $450,000 across the full 6 years is $4 million. That number in, I believe, year 4 has restarting that process. So the chief could probably, if you have questions, could probably talk a little bit more about that, but it's an agreement that over time we have to continue to re-up for that particular set of equipment and software. Next is turnout gear for our fire department. So $100,000 in fiscal year 2025, an additional $100,000 in 26 and 27. Next is the ballistic information network. So roughly a little under $150,000 in 2025 and another $150,000 in 2030. That is the NIBIN system. So yes.
I was going to ask the chief, I know when we bought that system, one of the things we thought would happen is that it would be a shared resources for our partners in the Quad Cities. So I'm curious of how often our partner cities are using it. But then also, like, when we share resources, like I understand sometimes we borrow resources from Bettendorf. Do we exchange money for that, or how does that work?
So traditionally, we haven't exchanged money. We've been utilizing resources for agreements. For NIBIN specifically, we're looking at a future cost share. We haven't gotten there yet, but that has fully now expanded out to the Quad City use. So for the information we're getting from those systems and working with the Quad Cities, it's a very valuable public safety piece there. So we're going to continue to work on that shared cost.
And, we probably did, it's been a few years since we purchased this, but the time it was taking for us to process this through Des Moines to now how quickly we're able to process this information.
So yeah, we were looking at a 9-month turnaround when it come through forensics, when it comes to cartridge casings or shell casings. Now we're getting in within 24 hours.
Awesome.
Okay. Next, as we get into our riverfront category, so these are a set of programs that are tied to implementation of our flood resiliency plan. So the structural solution component, $1 million in the upcoming fiscal year, essentially $1 million every fiscal year through, for a total of $6 million. Those particular, that funding, which has been a couple of years, has allowed us to be able to move forward on a number of those recommendations from HR Green. Specifically, we are looking at some berm restoration down at Black Hawk Creek and Walnut Creek that's been going really well. We're have some designs moving forward with some pump stations down there as well. In addition, this provides a funding source for when able to get grants that we can move quickly rather than waiting for a new budget to get amended. An example for that would be the community funding program that the federal government was able to provide for us for River Drive and Marquette intersection. So they provided, I believe it was 75% of that cost. Well, our 25%, this is what we're able to utilize. And so once again, once we receive that, by having this funds available, we're able to move quickly and keep moving those projects forward. So we have a number of other ones scheduled for this as we continue to move it forward as well. In addition, we have a number of grants out there. One of them I think is on your agenda now for approval that kind of continues to push that forward. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just, do we have, or I would like, if we don't, I would like to suggest we think about flood resiliency, again, with new people around the table, flood resiliency plan update, a little background on where we are. I think would be really helpful for all of us, because now we do have a lot of moving parts, which is fantastic, because we're starting to attack the plan, but that's, I think it would be helpful. So if we could do that on a Tuesday, great, thank you. Back into maybe.
But we are gonna get work session overload with
I know.
schedules.
But this is an important one.
Happy to do it, but-
Has a lot of deep history and it'll come back and back, so.
I think we can tie that one in whenever we bring the water pollution control plant
Great.
study. That would probably be a
Super.
natural fit and will be upcoming in the near term. So we can just pair those.
Next is, this is my favorite part of the entire presentation, is our sanitary sewers. It's the one that no one ever really thinks about. So before diving into this, I would like to give a little background. So in 2013, the city and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources entered into a consent order. And so I would say, I would applaud the city at the time, had a collaborative approach to the DNR of how we can help improve our system. So instead of fighting that, which is what a couple of communities in Iowa did, and then things were mandated to them at very high cost, instead, by having a collaborative approach with the DNR, we've been able to work alongside them and make investments in our system as a whole. And I believe that's what you'll see in the next few slides. They are primarily interested in what's happening at the plant. And so that was that was kind of our narrative to them, is like, can we please make this on the front end so we don't have to make the necessary improvements on the back end, not to mention the improvements to our residents. And so I think it's been a really successful program. They have been happy with our annual reports year after year as we continue to make those significant levels of investment. So as we move forward, so contract sewer repair in the upcoming fiscal year, about $1.2 million, $7.8 million over 6 years. This is the program that pays for the contracts for when we have emergency sewer issues that pop up over time, or even we can be proactive, that we notice that the problem is occurring and we can go after those problems and fix those before they become emergency issues. So as you can see, it's pretty heavily utilized throughout the entire city. Next is our sewer lateral repair program. I would say this was probably one of the, if not, the most popular programs we have or we offer our residents at the city. So essentially, if you have a sewer lateral issue, you pay a $500 deductible. The city will come out and we'll take a look at it. We have contractors that we will utilize, and then we will cover the remaining of the cost up to $10,000. And as you can see, about $1.2 million in the next fiscal year, 7.2 million over the 6 year. Any given year, I would say we utilize about $1 million to that $1.2 million over a 12-year stretch. So very, very highly utilized, highly popular program. And once again, you can kind of see just how much it's been used over since, I think its inception, I think my memory is correct, around that 2013, 2014 time period.
One of the best things we ever.
Get to be a hero.
Next is, this is a new program. We've kind of refashioned some of these. So SSES program, that stands for the Sanitary Sewer Evaluation and Survey Program. And it essentially provides funding for sewer basin studies. Those sewer basin studies are what help identify the issues and problems. Going back to our consent order, one of the primary driving functions of that is the removal of inflow and infiltration into the system. So in essence, you only want sewer to be going through your sewer pipe. You don't want water, whether it's rainwater or groundwater coming through there, because when it goes through there, it fills up the capacity, and then that is when backups occur. And so, not to mention, it then flows down to our treatment facility, and then we're treating rainwater essentially, and that's not what you want because that takes up capacity at the plant. So removal of I&I is a primary driver for our sanitary sewer program, and this helps identify those areas. I will say, reason why this is a new style program in our plan is we've had years and years of these studies that have been performed 10, 15 years ago that had all these recommendations. We've actually been implementing those along the way, to the point now we've implemented them all. So now it's time to start new ones, and we're going to be very strategic and targeted in our approach. So currently right now, about $2 million set aside in the next fiscal year, $6 million across the 6 year. What's showing on the screen is the 3 basins we currently have under investigation. So Silver Creek in green, Robin Creek in blue, and orange is the North Park. Once again, we're trying to, we've already had previous, I say sewer metering done there, so we know that those sewers are getting I&I and getting water into the system. These will help identify specifically where and then how we can have those recommendations to fix them. And that then rolls directly into the next program, which is the rehabilitation program. So this provides funding, essentially $2.4 million next year, $16.6 million over the 6-year plan. This is the funding source we use to address the problems that we find out in the evaluation studies. Over time, and this could be through manhole replacement or rehabilitation, it could be lining existing sewers, so that it's a technology that's not new, but one that we've had tremendous success with. So instead of having to, dig up a roadway and remove sewer and then put in new sewer, we can actually line existing sewer with new material and get another 50+ years of life out of it. It's an amazing process and one we heavily utilize. And I would actually say what's on the screen is past completed projects we've done. The little small dots are the manhole rehabilitations. The lines are where we've actually lined those sewers. And then the bigger dots is where we've had projects that specifically removed I&I from the system. You'll notice they're primarily focused on the river. And that was the night of what, if anyone remembers, for 2 years plus, we had River Drive pretty much under constant detour. And that's because we had about a $10.5 to $11 million sewer project where we removed these old connections from our sewer system. And we've already seen a tremendous amount of improvement at our wastewater treatment facility. So we are constantly seeing benefits to what the work we're doing. Next is our stormwater conveyance system category. The next one, and that's a combination of both green infrastructure and gray infrastructure, and we have two examples before you. The first is green, so Goose Creek Park, so stream stabilization. So you can see roughly up there around what is it, Appomattox to Maine. So I'm just stabilizing the creek system there. So $300,000 in fiscal year '25 and about $340,000 in fiscal year '26. And this is another one we're actually applying for some state and federal grants so that we can actually increase the size and scope of this particular project. We've actually gotten a couple of those, or we're getting close on getting a couple of those grants as well. Next is the gray infrastructure side of the stormwater conveyance system, and that is a project on East High and Forest, and that's a realignment of the existing storm sewer system. So $575,000 in the next fiscal year to perform this project. So on the map, green showcases our existing sanitary sewer. Purple actually showcases the existing storm sewer, and then orange is the project. I know it's a little hard to see, but you can kind of see, I think, how do we call this? Modernizing our infrastructure. You can see the storm line actually runs into private property right near a home, near that property, and then comes out. So it's obviously better for us to have our public infrastructure in the public right of way, just in case from a liability standpoint, from an ongoing maintenance standpoint. So we have a series of these projects that we like to do over time to make sure we correct those past issues. Next is our street maintenance category. So we fund street maintenance in two buckets. One is high volume street repair and one is neighborhood. The high volume street repair, the differentiators between them is one is primarily focusing on arterials and our collectors. So basically the main roadways that everyone utilizes. So think your 53rds, your Locust, your Rockinghams, your Jerseys, your Fairmounts, Division, et cetera. And in fiscal year '25, we have $4.6 million. Across the 6 years, about $27 million. What is shown on the map below, and what's in blue, is the projects that's been completed since calendar year or construction year 2015. And what's orange is what we're proposing for this upcoming construction year. I would say in past years, I've provided you with a list of what our roadways are that we're looking to do. I'm actually going to hand that out some point, probably Wednesday, because I would actually like to give you a more comprehensive list of all of our infrastructure-related projects, whether it's flood, bridges, streets, not only focus it entirely on construction, but all of our design projects as well. So you'll be getting that coming up in the next few days. But nevertheless, just want to point out a couple highlights on this one. We have two projects slated for Locust Street. So East Locust from Eastern to Grand and West Locust from Lincoln to Clark. And this is where, in my opinion, I like showing these maps because over time, you can kind of see how it all starts coming together. For the longest time, people would say that Locust Street was not a priority. Now you can see over a number of years, we're able to really put aside a huge level of investment into West Locust, for instance. A lot of the times, we get asked, well, why can't you just do it all in one go? Well, then you'd be taking all your money in just one location of the city. Not to mention that is a heavy burden on businesses and residents to go through a tremendous amount of construction over year. So we do try to break those up from time to time and be respectful. Not to mention, we also try to be cognizant of events and festivities. So in particular, I'll use the one out on West Locust as example. The Mississippi Valley Fair is very popular. And so having construction in or around that time period, not a good idea. So we try to make sure we focus our timing of those around there.
Question.
Yes, sir.
What about North Division? I mean, as we continue to build out the industrial area on the other side of Interstate 80, that's going to become one of the main arterial entrances coming from people that are working within the city, getting over to those industrial areas. I don't see any colors on North Division at all. I mean, ultimately, my feeling is that that may even need to be a 3-lane at some point in time with all the traffic that's on it right now, as it continues to expand with the bacon plant and Amazon and some of the things that we've redone in zoning, making some more light industrial areas available on the other side of Interstate 80. It doesn't seem, we've got access off of Northwest Boulevard, but I'm thinking into the central area of that industrial area. North Division is the main way to get in there.
Nope, and we'll take a look into that. I know North Division from a maintenance perspective, just purely replacing the existing surface is something that's on our radar, but we'll take a look as well as.
This would be one way to accomplish two things.
Yep.
Okay.
For clarification, where it has a dot on North Division and then on Marquette, is that just the intersection being repaired?
Yes, you stole my thunder. It's hard, and that's where this is a little bit interesting. Size and scope of projects can vary, and sometimes it looks something small, but can be very costly. So one of the other projects we have is intersection reconstruction on Central Park, both at Division and Marquette. Also, you'll see a fairly large line on West 53rd. That is going to be a maintenance project for us. So we're actually looking to do what we call diamond grinding. So think of where when you have on concrete panels, where over time they will settle and shift. And so when you're riding over them and you go to do, because you're hitting those, we're actually going to go through and diamond grind those to try to remove, like flatten those back out to see how something like that works on such a heavily utilized roadway. If it's successful, then that's in future years, we can expand that to a lot of other roads. I will also say that's something too that's hard to differentiate is sometimes a project of that size, like, oh, that's a maintenance project, it's probably a couple $100,000. We're like, well, that looks like a fairly large, we're doing a lot of work on a big chunk of road, whereas those intersections at Central Park, that's probably $900,000, just for scale.
So that diamond grinding, is that like an alternative to joint replacement?
It's to see if we can avoid some joint replacement, yes. Because some part of that West 53rd has, so the interesting thing we're interested in is half of that road has had joint replacement and the other half hasn't. So we're interested in, when we do the diamond grinding, what does that look like against those two sections and how they hold up?
I'm curious about that. It seemed like for a few years there, we were doing a lot of joint replacement. And, the thing I noticed right away is now you've created
Yes.
another joint, and they degrade pretty quick. Are we still doing joint replacement?
Yes. I think it's interesting. If you get 10 engineers in a room, 5 will like concrete, 5 will like asphalt. The issue with concrete is, in theory, it lasts longer. However, when you start needing to do maintenance, there's not many options. Whereas when you have asphalt, there's a lot more maintenance-related options that you can do to kind of sustain the life cycle of the roadway. And so we're trying some different maintenance methods on concrete roads, seeing as how we have so many, especially on our main arterials.
I have a real quick question. So the last that I can remember, the intersections at Marquette and Division, we had laid down the gravel, did the overlay. That was the last big maintenance that we did at those intersections. How are we going to fix that? I mean, is that going to be?
So, twofold. So those were, I believe it was Cape Seal that we did, which is a maintenance treatment for asphalt roadways. If I remember correctly, Marquette is actually where the stopping movements on those kind of pushed that Cape
That was,
Seal.
it's Division.
Was it Division? Okay, that pushed that up. So we have found that Cape Seal actually works really well on your straightaways, but once you start hitting those main intersections where you're having that constant stopping and the tire pressure is shoving it, that's where it's having problems. To solve that issue, those particular two intersections are getting full reconstruction. So that will be removed. My second point is East Locust, that section between Eastern and Grand, got the same treatment. And the idea is on these maintenance style treatments, you're extending the life of the roadway by probably only 2 to 5 to 7 years, so that you can get there with those more, either, if it's asphalt, mill and overlay, or full reconstructions. So that's what I'd say for that eastern to Grandone section of Locust. We didn't have the funding necessarily in the budget to do a larger scale project, which is what we're proposing now. And so that's now, we did that maintenance related project, and now we're able to go back and do the larger rehabilitation. No. Okay. Don't know if there's any more questions. Okay.
I want to thank your Thunder again.
Next is our neighborhood street repair. So we do neighborhood street repair in two different manners. The first is we do contracted work. So that's the design contracts and the construction contracts that come before you for approval. And then the other side is what we have our street maintenance division do, and we'll talk through those two things separately. The first one is the contracted work. So and this dollar value is combined, just so we can show neighborhood streets in one single category. But 4.4 million in 2025, 26 million across 6 years. The contracted work is a fairly new program. I would say we've only been doing this and funding this for about 4 or 5 years now. And that's what's in front of this on the screen right there. So everything in blue is what we've been able to do in that 4 to 5 year time period. And what's in orange is what we're proposing for next year. Once again, we'll get you a full list of what those are this upcoming week. But just some highlights. I'll point out Alderman Jobson isn't here, but we'll do Lorton Avenue, south of 53rd Street to 46 is a highlighted one. We have some sections on south of 53rd on Colony Drive. Another one, I believe that splits 2 wards, is 13th Street, just south of the fairgrounds. That's an interesting example of how projects can shift over time. Originally last year, we were looking to perform that project as a mill and overlay, so removal of 2.5, 3 inches of asphalt and then put new asphalt down. Well, as we began doing our investigation, and we do core drills to see what layers look like underneath, there was only 2 inches to 1.5 inches of asphalt on there. So that project turned from a $400,000 mill and overlay project to probably an $800,000 full reconstruction project. So I talked with Alderman McGinnis, and we had to push it a year, but it's coming back before you, and it's going to be a full reconstruction, so we make sure we do it correctly. Okay. The next piece of that is our in-house capacity. So our street maintenance division, they do perform work. Once again, what's in front of you in blue is what they've done probably in the last 7 to 8 years. And what's in orange is what they are proposing as part of their work plan for this upcoming year. I will add a couple of caveats. You will notice that these are vastly smaller just by the size of the marks. They're vastly smaller, and that's largely because the state has implemented restrictions on what cities can perform in terms of maintenance work. There's a series of requirements, whether it's, I think, only 500 feet or less. There's a dollar value that they attach to it, which is around $60,000. And there's a couple of other items on there as well. Anything over those thresholds, we actually have to put plans together and bid it out for contractors. So once again, it kind of restricts our ability to do larger based projects, but nevertheless, what's in front of there is what our proposal is. I will add the caveat, sometimes over the years when things arise, let's say flooding, this is also our workforce who helps respond to floods, who help respond to derechos. So from time to time, this work plan can shift over time because those staff members have to get diverted to items that were unplanned. And so sometimes this can move and shift over time, whereas our contracted work is much more stable and much more consistent. Yes, sir.
What's the evaluation stage? How do you evaluate what streets need to be done?
So we do that based on whether, we do it multiple ways. The high volume, your arterials and your collectors, we actually have a combination. We have software, I believe it's called DTIMS, that provides deterioration models over time that helps provide valuations on benefit cost. We use that to try to model over a 10-year life cycle to try and tell us what's the best benefit cost for the resources we have available. And then we also, but that doesn't take into account the human element. So we just use that as a good basis. And then we have our engineering team take a look at that as well.
Primarily residential areas is what I'm
Residential areas. So as a team, we actually go through and do condition assessments every year. We take a look at number of households served. We look at whether it's on a snow route, whether what's the cost. Some residential, if it's a small block reconstruction versus at some point, are you spending $800,000 or are you spending $300,000? How far you can use your resources. There's a whole lot of variables that come into play.
The other reason I ask is I've got a number of streets in my ward between Division and Pine that primarily, 58th is one of them, that are just a real mess. And I'm just trying to figure out how I can get some of those repaired in a relatively acceptable time period.
I would love to hear which ones that you have of interest, and maybe we can touch base and see what some of those are. We do have a pretty extensive list that we keep. I would say, say for the contracted out portion, we typically get about $3 million. I think the list is probably $25, $30, $35 million total, should we do them all. And obviously, we're probably not looking at all of them, but 58th, if I remember correctly, I think I have that one as well. So I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Okay,
But would love to touch base with you.
thank you.
When, you don't have to answer this today, but when was the last time the state changed the threshold? Because with the, equipment costs, labor costs, material costs, I think they're kind of restricting us quite a bit. I don't know, if there's anything we can do to get that threshold maybe raised up so our crews could actually go do more instead of having their hands tied and say, oh, you can only do this much.
No, happy to look into that, because it is something that we have to answer and have questions, and I'm sure you as well get those questions of, well, why did you stop? Like, why didn't you
You
go
were
the
here
next
already,
block or
you're
half
here
block?
already, you're set up, why didn't you just finish the
Yes.
job? But that's hard to explain to people that we can only do so much but our hands are tied. But if there's something we could do to advocate the state or whatever to raise that threshold, that would be great.
Yep, we'll look into that question. Okay, only a few more. Next is our alley repair program. So in fiscal year '25, $600,000 across the 6 years, $2.1 million. What's in blue is past projects, proposed projects. You are now getting those resolutions of necessity, resolutions of assessment coming through. That is what is in orange. I would say about 2 years ago, the city council changed the assessment process or the percentages. So we used to have 50-50 for residential. It's now 75-25 for residential. We also have opened it up for commercial, and I believe that is 50-50. The intent was to try and get more alleys done through that, and I would say that has been successful. We certainly do get more and more requests that come in through that process. And I will also say we have now established, we use Bruce and his team for DREAM kind of as the template. So we now have a set time when the application process opens up to when it closes to when it comes before you. So once again, I think that improvement has been successful. Okay. Next is a series of individual street projects. This is the grant or specialty ones. West 53rd Street reconstruction. So in fiscal year '27, about $150,000 for design. And then in fiscal year 2028, $2.8 million for a city match to an $8.1 million grant. Total project about $11 million, the scope of which is from Brady to about, it's a bridge over Candlelight Creek, and then from Northwest Boulevard to Pine. This is a great example of how when we get to fiscal year '28, 3 years from now, you will see your street budget number spike with an $8 million grant. And once again, it's just a fluctuation over time. Yes.
So is this like it's the same as our big project?
Yep.
And that's just finished up. Then our next big federal grant project is 3rd and 4th Street, right? And then this would be the one that follows on to that?
So this was, yes, it's the same funding source. So it's from the Surface Transportation Block Grant, which is a formula-based funding that flows through bi-state. It's the same funding sources. There's 53rd, then 3rd and 4th. The next project you'll see is West Central Park. It's a smaller one, it's about $4 million. That's the same funding source, and then comes West 53rd.
And if I could just make a comment to, my colleagues on council, when I first started 8 years ago, those federal dollars that we got, the council was using them to build new roads, Veterans Memorial, 76, right? And we made the decision after those projects that we were going to use the federal dollars to replace existing infrastructure, so to replace the roads that we already have. And so now, over the last 6 years, we've been using these dollars to replace big roads, right? 53rd, 3rd and 4th Street. And I mean, it's a big impact. It's taking care of what you already have as opposed to adding to your long-term liability. It's just a really good practice, and I think we've seen a lot of improvements over the last 6 years because of it.
Go ahead.
The other thing I would add is these projects take a very long time. The 3rd and 4th Street reconstruction was chosen about 2018. Then that money goes through a process, all of it through approval through bi-state, correct?
I'm the chair of the
right.
transportation
Yeah.
policy and by state, and that's why it's so important to have partnerships and people that
Right.
work with you to get, otherwise we don't get this money.
Right.
Right. Working with our partners at the state and federal level to get federal monies first designated for our area, and then to work with our partners around here to ensure we get the money for our city. All these we're talking about is what happened there, and a
Right.
couple of council members, Mr. Dunn being one, that served on this committee with me. And that's what's so critical about partnerships and working well with each other, is to get this. Otherwise, you don't get that.
Yeah, and just the other thing I wanted to add is it takes patience, because literally, I think it was 2018, when the city said we're gonna go for 3rd and 4th Street, and they're in pretty terrible, and from Telegraph, to Harrison, and, they're in bad shape, but it's taken that long because it has to get then into the federal budget. So, we designate, we get it approved, but then we have to wait for it to come into the budget. So when you're hearing about these, because it may, it may be way out, because that's just the way the process works. And we had to complete 53rd, I think, before we could start 3rd and 4th also. So anyway, it's a long range and very important, thing, but it takes a long time. So sometimes you're working for the future, which is great.
Next project is, fiscal year 2025, $500,000 of city investment to leverage against a $500,000 state grant for $1 million. This is to design and construct dual left turn lanes on eastbound traffic for 53rd and northbound traffic on Utica Ridge. So that's a heavily trafficked area. So we were actually able to apply for and receive state safety grant funds for this particular project. So look for design this upcoming calendar year, and then construction in the next year. So once again, I think this is a good example. We are continuously looking for different funding sources to leverage city resources, so we're not having to constantly spend city resources on 100% of project cost. Another example of that, this is the West Central Park reconstruction project that was brought up a moment ago. So in 2025, $400,000 for design. So in 2026, about $2.6 million of federal grant for about a $4 million project. It's to reconstruct the road from Lincoln to Fairmount. Next, about 2 more slides to go from a project perspective. Traffic calming. So in, I would say, 2021 was when the city council first initiated this particular program. So this provides funding for a whole host of traffic calming measures, whether there are physical improvements such as speed humps or signage along the way. This can be done in a whole host of different measures. But 150,000 in fiscal year 2025, about 900,000 over the 6-year cycle. And you can see on the map, these are ones we've already started to implement throughout the city.
As a you out, can you take this list and then provide it to us as like what type of traffic calming it was? So the one thing, as we passed the ordinance for traffic calming, what I don't want to see happen is traffic calming is a speed hump program, and that's all we do. Because there's 100 different tools to slow traffic down. So I just want to I want to see what's the different variety of tools that we're using. Thanks.
Nope, happy to provide that.
Is this also including warning lights
Yeah.
at dangerous intersections?
Yep.
Okay.
That was the intent was it's a very generalized program that we can utilize in a lot of different ways. So it doesn't have to be specifically speed humps or signage or particular signage. It allows us to provide a funding source that if we needed to, we can move forward on a number of different measures.
When we prioritize this kind of stuff, safety should be the #1 driver, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have a formula, and we can share that as well, that our traffic engineer puts these. I know if you have roadways that you feel that we need to look at and we need to do studies, please send them our way. We will do that study, apply that formula, and then get back to you. I believe that was set up through the ordinance, but we will send that back out as well.
Can you also send us the places where you expect further traffic calming to take place? You see the orange dots is where it's been done.
Yep.
But maybe an idea of what the future may look like or what the city is currently looking at as to other locations, please.
Happy to do so. And then our last set of projects is focused at our wastewater treatment facility. So digester programs, so in fiscal year 25, 1.2 million, 4.7 across the 6-year program, and then clarifiers at $2 million in the later years. This is just showing, I know we've had conversations about a larger scale project, and there's going to be a work session, and staff's going to bring back to you about what the larger scale pieces of equipment for this facility. But in terms of what available resources we have in the moment, that's what's plugged in here. And once you get on the map, you can just kind of see what's in blue is your primary and secondary clarifiers, and what's in orange is your digesters. And with that, I will turn it back over unless there's any further questions.
One thing that was in our packet that wasn't in your presentation that I wanted to talk about was the dollars that we're putting into the Adler and the River Center. So when I look at that, and we're doing the routine maintenance stuff that you have to do to maintain your assets. But we're not doing anything that's making either of them more competitive in the market, right? And so I think really we need to take a look at how do we do that. I think the River Center, there's a lot you have to do to be competitive in that market. I'm not an expert in that. I think we need to start looking at how we're going to do it. With the Adler specifically, I think, seeding is one of those things that I know we're not going to fund that in the next 3 years or right away, but I think you have to put it into your long-term budget because part of that is going to probably be fundraising and private dollars with some entities in our community that have an interest in it. And so at least putting something on the, 28, 29 that says, look, this is important to us, so we can start getting the partners together to start trying to figure out how we're going to get the money. That's all.
Anyone else?
Trying to
I
find
would-
it, I didn't have a question, but go ahead. Something else?
Just a quick question about our digesters, are they covered or not?
They are.
We capture the methane? Or do we just flare it off?
Primarily, we're flaring it off, and then we do have some recapture. It's a little bit of a hybrid, but we can get you a more detailed answer from Brian on that as a follow-up.
Another reason I ask is there are programs where you can recapture the methane and do a 30-70 blend with natural gas, and it still provides the same BTU value. So there may be a market where instead of flaring it off, we might be able to capture it and sell it.
And I believe that was part of the HR Green overall study that they did, so we can get you a high-level answer now, but the work session will cover that in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I had a couple questions. Most of them were actually answered through the presentation. Two that were not. One, I'm looking at page 95 of the material presented in advance. So I know this is something that's come up recently regarding junior theater. So generally, bigger overall question. I know, I'm assuming this was probably prepared way in advance of the Annie Whitmire vote that took place. And I know that there's still unknowns at this time because it's conditional and we need to know whether or not it in fact goes through. But when and how does the planning in terms of funds take place if we're gonna have to look for a different facility for junior theater? Question one. And then question two, I think Alderman Grip mentioned something at the meeting in regards to the city previously looking at spending a certain amount for demolition or something like that, and maybe that money can be converted. Maybe you can expound more on that so that I can better understand kind of where we're at with that and how, essentially, the bigger overarching question is, what do we need to do now to ensure that we are adequately preparing to address the question regarding what's next for junior theater, assuming everything goes through with the conveyance?
So I can take that. So I've challenged Chad and his team to work collaboratively with Junior Theater and some of our other partners to respond to this Junior Theater question. And they will be looking at, I think, a variety of options that will come back to you late summer, early fall, which could be anything from working out an arrangement to stay in rehab all the way to building something entirely brand new, so a new building. When we were talking about the debt service fund earlier and that target's 15 million, there's some increment that's sitting there, and part of the recommendation from me to preserve that increment for right now is to adequately address that particular issue. And so I think that would be likely the ideal funding source for that, or some of your local sales tax increment that you have, since you have capacity in both. But I think there is sufficient cash on hand that we have as a city to respond to this in a way that meets the needs. And I know they're working through that needs assessment, and there's some other partnership opportunities that may exist where the cost may not be $8 or $9 million to build a new building, that maybe it's only 3 or 4 million. So they'll work through that and then we'll bring that back. So it may not be reflected here, but there is definitely adequate cash on hand to deal with it.
And I guess one question for Chad. I know I attended the community meeting and they were taking the surveys from community members. Do you know approximately when we'll receive the results of those surveys?
Yeah, the survey should be open for another week, and then we'll compile that information and have it probably for the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. All right, one last question. Page 125. This is looking at IT capital improvement program. General question, are we adequately funding our IT department to ensure that we have everything that's necessary, i.e. Windows 10 or 11, et cetera, to ensure that we are, in 2024 and not living in previous years?
The IT director just gave me a thumbs up. And we will be rolling out a full, I would say, implementation of 365. Do you want to give a quick update on that? Since there's an upcoming item.
We did a preliminary, I guess, rollout of 365, some of the stakeholders within the city. And then the plan is for this next fiscal year. How we utilize city services and equipment as well. Hopefully we'll take some of those, things like that.
Great news. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else?
Nope, nothing else. The only remaining slides were just, the schedule. So the next action items, again, you'll get your operating memo back to you, by end of day on Tuesday. Certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we will see you the following Tuesday.
Good of the order? Have a good day.